All right, welcome everyone to Planetary Health First, Mars Next. And we got an amazing guest today, Stephen Farber. And he is no stranger to startups. I really have affinity and love for healthcare startups that are really trying to do good, do a huge maze, connecting care, making the care experience better. And he is the CEO and co-founder at HealthHive. And we're going to be diving deep into that. And our topic today is tilting at windmills. Can Don Quixote's spirit pierce healthcare? I love that topic. But just before we get going, a little bit about Stephen. He is also a board of directors volunteer at the American Society on Aging. He's also an investor on longevity. And he's no stranger to startups and healthcare as a CEO and co-founder for almost 10 years at a FDA-approved workflow technology company. So, Stephen, you want to help our audience know a little more about yourself before we do our deep dive today?
Sure. I think like lots of people in health tech, I'm not from the health tech world, right? I was a lawyer and investment banker, encountered, family illness, and that became the impetus to say, rather than investment banking, there might be something that would be a little bit more meaningful. And, I wound up moving from banking to taking time off to participate in family caregiving for my mother with pancreatic cancer. And once she died, decided that having seen that process, I wanted to stay in health tech. So I wound up starting a cardiology practice in New York with some cardiologists, kind of to explore opportunities and figure out where I thought there was a place to start a company and invest and really solve problems. That was clinical workflow in cardiology SaaS space. Sold that company in 2018 and then said that was horrible and the greatest thing to do. Let's start another company. And this time we really wanted to focus on solving the much broader problem of what happens when an older adult and their family members start to enter the world of healthcare, and how do you put the pieces together and do something that makes sense?
Well, I really appreciate your work, what you're doing. Healthcare is so personal, it's not just business, and I'm dealing with this right now. This is my evergreen whenever I talk, because this is what a lot of what the show's about. I have an 85-year-old mother. She's pretty good. She's independent, but she's got health issues. She's on all those pills that doctors love to give, whether it be for blood pressure or heart and a pacemaker, but she's independent. Then I have a dad who's 91 on hospice, dementia. So I thank you for everything you're doing. It's so critical. The decision-making process, the care coordination is not anything. And it wasn't until his last hospitalization, after 12 days, he was rehospitalized, readmitted. Finally, we got to that angel, if you would, that nurse practitioner, that palliative care, who was able to give my family the right decision-making to do what was the right care. Now, I just thought that would be a good, I thank you is all I'm saying. So I'm glad you're here doing what you're doing.
I love what I'm doing. And the more we get into it, the more we understand how different everybody's problems are, what they know, and what they're trying to solve. And that just makes the challenge of the company we're trying to build, even tougher. And as we look at healthcare, rather than looking at it as a technology, I'm really looking at it as, how do you create a community of caring? So there are all these people that know and touch and are hopefully trusted by a patient and their family, but nobody's talking to each other. So how do we start to figure out, how do you engage with these people and get answers back to families that they don't even know the questions they should be asking?
You're so right. So if I hear you, you're trying to create this health hive, if you would, the whatever is analogy or metaphor, for an actual decision making by peer to peer. Then you're also not just peer to peer. You're actually validating in some way that those recommendations, are, I don't want to say evidence-based, because we're moving forward to 3.0, because it's personalized, right? Because there's not much. So just kind of making that more effective and efficient, and that process must be so hard to use as a scientist, as a founder, like how to make that decision tree, how to make that flow. So that's a huge nasty task. So tell me about that. I mean, that's a big problem.
Hence the Don Quixote, right? Well, we're very realistic, and what you just described, that's where we want to get to. Mm-hmm. That's not where we are today. The starting point is to say, who are the people involved and how do the parts work? And we're trying to bring those together into the Hive, which is just this place that is centered around the individual. And that's where activity takes place. That's where data sets. But really what it ultimately is a way for us to start to give answers to people to the questions that they want to know. As you likely have experienced, you go to one clinician or rehab or, one environment, and the information there never seems to get to others where that information can help. And that's really what we're trying to do. And, we're not trying to do this alone. For us, healthcare is a community. So we're looking at all the other companies that are out there and saying, how do we integrate with them? How do we pull the pieces together?
So where do you see with QN or whatever the acronym is? Yeah. Is that a concern for your leverage, or do you see yourself?
Oh, no.
Okay.
No, when we started this, we knew we were ahead of the market. We can't have a superb product yet. The market isn't there, but the evolution of what's going on in terms of data sharing and some of the payment models and the QHIN, which at the time, we were just looking at fire and data availability. The QHIN for us is a critical piece to making this whole solution more fluid. So my goal isn't to recreate anything that's out there in terms of trying to compete or solve with them. It's how do we pull these pieces together and leverage them.
So where are you right now on your journey?
Well, we started in an awkward place, which is looking at the care transition from skilled nursing to home. And we did that because, if you know Jonathan Bush's old saying, it's focus on the shit that nobody else wants to do. And that's a place where there's lots of dysfunction upon discharge. So, we have a back-end integration with a company called Point Click Care, who, if you don't know them, they're like the Epic of the senior living world. They've got 70% market share. That gave us the ability to easily integrate lots of clinical data that otherwise would have been a challenge. And, the focus in skilled nursing was really for us to learn about how do we automate all of our processes? What is the stuff that people care about? How do you engage? So that was our starting point. We've now moved to the next step where we've started to tie in geriatric practices. And our goal isn't to really solve the problem of geriatric workflow, but we want to understand what are the things that matter to them in terms of data and social information. And while we're doing this, the real objective is to say on the patient side, what questions does the patient and or the family have? So we've added a resource center where we've integrated with a company called TCare to pull in the resources. We've integrated with Medicare to pull in Medicare data, FlexPod to pull in insurance data. So the pieces are all coming together. Now we're under an NDA, so I can't get into the details, but we're now about to pull in another very important component of the workflow. And as we build, we're just asking the market, what is the problem that really matters to you? And for a lot of them, it's just understanding that there are places out there or people to talk to that can help solve their problems, because most of us have no clue. I mean, when I first was involved in caregiving, and we have 5 doctors in our family, it was amazing how little we knew. And we were a pretty informed group with resources in New York City. And then you start to talk to others that haven't had that experience. And there's really basic stuff that is so frustrating and aggravating to people. And we're trying to say, how can we help you there? Medication, perfect example.
Yeah, Stephen, and again, I can just say from my journey, just getting my father who has dementia, who was not able to articulate the blocker of why he wasn't taking a shower. Fear of failure, fear of falling, shower bench. Oh my gosh, we can't get him out of the shower now.
Right.
I mean, it's that kind of stuff. I mean, it sounds like stupid, duh, but to get one, we got 2 of them in all his different places. And he knows with confidence, I know how to transition them. I just walk them in. And I mean, just helping caregivers with, getting the wheelchair, all those little things, and then just home modification. I could imagine that is such a big thing. So anyway, I know what you're doing is important, but when you start, you just don't know. So.
Right. And our focus is very different today than it was when we were starting this, because we just didn't understand the broad market enough. The people who, if you're charging $5 a month, they're making a decision of, do I not take medicine or do I pay for your $5? Which is why we've really focused on making sure that on the family side, everything we do, we're trying to keep free, so that it's all no cost. And our business model is driven by solving problems for the enterprise, who then, will be paying for this.
That's good. I like that. So to me, that sounds like a challenge right now in healthcare, because what the enterprise with the data and what they value is not necessarily what a caregiver. How do you've
been involved in this, and that's the challenge: is what is the balance between the things that happen for the patient and their family, or things that's really what they care about, right? The perfect clinical answer is rarely the most important thing. It's somebody understanding who I am, what I am, and my preferences. So for us, we started by really focusing on the enterprise, not because that's where we wanted to be, but we knew if we couldn't solve problems for the enterprise, there wouldn't be a revenue model.
So what are you solving right now? What is the driving factor right now for enterprise that you're seeing?
Unfortunately, it's the stupid stuff, right? It's operational efficiency.
Okay.
If you can position, efficiency in terms of staffing, then obviously that's important. One of the things that we expected, but the amount of focus it's gotten has surprised us, is actually how much marketing people are involved in what we're doing, because it's helping to drive star ratings and referrals. So while that's not where we want the focus of the business to be, at this stage, all I care about is solving people's problems so they'll pay for it, as we ultimately move up to solving the real problem of, within value-based care, of how do you make this more efficient.
And when you mean star ratings, are you meaning specifically to the SNFs, the skilled nursing facilities, or star ratings for the plans as well?
Well, ultimately, it will be for the plans as well.
Okay,
right now,
okay.
For us, we haven't looked at the plans yet because we're too early. And what I care about is trusted relationships and the engagement when you're dealing with providers or a care transition, a point where somebody's life is changing. The engagement is much higher. If I went up to the plan level, we don't know the markets well enough yet to allow them to say, go use HealthHive, because nobody's going to pick it up. You need people advocating for us.
What has been the most, like, your hypothesis that you were absolutely dead wrong on so far?
That healthcare cares more about health and outcomes than they do, and which is really sad. It is, most of health is a longer term investment in the patient. And the system just isn't designed that way, right? There are very few places now where the model really drives looking at the long-term investment in the individual for the best and lowest cost of care. And that's not an indictment of any particular player. It's an indictment of the system, right? The system doesn't work right because it wasn't designed to deliver the best long-term care. It was largely designed to compensate people for doing a certain thing. And so you get paid for doing tasks. I'm still amazed at how averse people are to sharing information for fear of losing their relationships, even though in many cases the law requires that data get shared. It just isn't being shared in the way it should be.
Interesting. And so you've been working at this. I know when I had a call with you, I really enjoyed talking to you. It's been too long. And this was really what I gathered from what you were doing is you're very intentional about being methodical about your practice. And I think there's a big problem with healthcare, digital health companies, that they try to be hype with no solution or a solution that no one really wanted. And I really appreciate the kind of you're in it for the long haul. Now, I know that makes it challenging for the investors and all that, but it probably has paid off because I talked to you before this whole reset. It was like 2 years ago, I think. I don't know for sure, but I hope that wisdom has helped give you a competitive advantage because we've seen so much crap. I mean, how many ED direct to my Amazon do we need for ED? I mean, or whatever. I mean, or just digital health to nowhere, doing nothing for a small segment of the population. And telehealth, I mean, I hate to say it, most telehealth, if you need to talk to your psychiatrist, you'd be better off just talking to him on the phone because you take 7 minutes to just find out getting on the stupid Zoom. I mean, I hate to say it, so I'll stop there.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very challenging space. And what we're trying to do is almost everybody who starts to understand what we're doing says, my God, this is what healthcare needs. And in the next breath, they're like, but this is impossible. And it really is so hard to pull the pieces together. We've made the decision. We have no outside investors yet because they wouldn't have the stomach for what we're doing. I would rather invest time and do this slowly to truly understand the market. Otherwise, my concern was we'd start to go down a path of, there's a path to profitability to solve a problem that isn't the problem that I want to solve. And for lots of people, that's very appealing and you have no choice but to do that. Fortunately, my wife has every night bangs her head against the wall, which is like, my God, keep doing this. It matters, but it's slow and it's hard. I don't want to pretend it's not.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like if you already would have gotten those investors, you'd probably end up being a staffing efficiency company.
Right. Yeah. I mean, there are a couple of very easy places to drive the business. And I want all of those other people to be our partners as opposed for me to solve those easy problems.
Yeah. So you're here. Not that I have a following of millions of people, but there's people that could be an investor, could be a partner, could be a customer, could be,
you've had a number of your guests are people that either I know, I respect, and they're on my list to potentially be partners in the future. And then a couple of people that I did not know that I was like, oh my God, this is someone that I want to know.
Wow.
It was, I mean, one in particular whom I'm embarrassed I didn't know, John Gorman, whose name I did not know. And as he was talking, it's like, my God, everything that he's talking about, those are the pieces we're looking to put together.
Yeah.
And whether you're talking about Jake in housing, or you're talking about, food as medicine, or you're talking about transportation or home modification. These are all people that we want to partner with in some form or another.
Well, it sounds like you and I need to talk in the green room before or after. I mean, seriously, Stephen, because I want your Hive. Your Hive is only as good as the nodes, right, in the network. If you use the Hive,
Exactly.
and I think that's the power of the Hive. If I know from a stupid, let's say, strategic, like what the metaphor is, like how LinkedIn now it's just
Right.
a crap show. But still, well, anyway, forgive me, Microsoft. I put stuff up, but it's
It works for
anyway.
you.
Well, yeah, but I'm also trying to get bigger on other things. I'm on YouTube.
Right.
I'm on X. No one follows me, and anyway, help me, show me a little love. But the thing that I appreciate what you're saying, because there is a ton of content out there, and I am intentionally, just like you, I'm trying to do what I'm scratching the itch, the stuff that I'm really excited about. And mostly it is in the space of older adults. And it's not just, I'm sorry, it's not just, a care company where you have an, unpaid nurse help out. These are big problems, and they're needing to have tech-enabled decision-making. And for such a long time, healthcare could care less, because it's not as easy as taking a pill. And there are, so anyway, I appreciate you. Sorry.
Many in tech think tech is the solution, and it's not. In healthcare, it is all about people, and then tech enablement for those people. I'm on the board of the American Society of Aging because I went to their conference. I had no idea what a CBO, what a community-based organization was. I went to their conference and I walked away saying, these are some of the most important people in healthcare, and they have no idea how valuable they are. They are the trusted relationship, and they're not really a part of healthcare.
Mm-hmm.
And as you look at, how community care hubs are forming now for these CBOs, where they're starting to bring in some technology, I think that's a hugely important piece to be bringing into healthcare. And if you talk about, the easy path would be to solve a staffing problem. One of the ways to look at this is there are actually a lot of people out there who are touching the individual and care about the individual. And if you can give them the tools to understand how they can help, what they can do, and then the output of that somehow is shared with others, that just brings lots of value to the individual and to the health system.
Yeah, and the sad reality is I don't know a lot about the CBOs. It sounds like some Medicare sort of official thing, but I do know a little bit, and what I hear about them. And what I find fascinating is when you go to like Evolence, which used to be Anthem,
right.
And I don't know why they rebrand. I imagine, I bet you they get a bunch of lawyers in the room and figure out how they can write off 30 years of a loss and wash out something and whatever. I don't know. It's pretty interesting. Just like Grant Cardone, I saw on a stupid whatever X or Reel or something. He's saying the only car I buy fat cash is I buy a Range Rover because it's 6,000 pounds, and on the IRS I can fully write it all off.
I had seen something along those lines.
I was like, and then I leased my Phantom for 36, and I put it all on the write-off of my business. But I guess my whole point is going back, because Evolence had this whole thing of what you're talking about, and it's wrapped under some CBO, which I've never heard of, and they're like literally trying to, they have so little funding, so little the CBOs aren't able to scale. Right. It's like these PACE programs that we have the evidence, we know they work, but there's like the silos of the funds,
exactly.
And that's really, unfortunately, we know what works. And so.
No, I mean, one of the things that we talk about when we were thinking of HealthHive is, we want to essentially enable a synthetic PACE by pulling the pieces together in HealthHive. I love the PACE model. Mm-hmm. I don't understand why it's not more prevalent, right? There's lots of data that says it works, and it doesn't work because it's great healthcare, right? It works because they know the individual, and they know their needs, and they understand them, and that's what you need.
Yeah, it sounds like it's all about money. It's all about the funding and the lack of the way the Medicaid, the way that dual eligible. And I believe, I hate to say it, these health plans are more powerful and they want to, I mean, it's just, there's no reason why. I mean, right now, I might be wrong by the data, but there's like 200,000 in the 50 states. So only 250,000 PACE members.
Right.
So, I mean,
I don't know the exact number, but that number sounds right.
Yeah, so there should be 10x that. Why? I mean, at least 2.5 million, and you know, we spend all this other money on all this other stuff as a nation. So anyway, I don't want to sound like I'm ranting. So anyway, I'll calm down and Stephen, I'm sorry.
Again, the system isn't structured the right way, and the problem is we do lots of incremental things, which I get. That's much easier. But what we really need to be doing is stepping back and saying, what do we want the system to look like? You know, and I think, you know, kudos to Medicare innovation. There are lots of things they're doing that don't work, but that's not failure. That's success. You're seeing what doesn't work. The fact that there is a new program coming out around dementia, that's whole patient care, is fabulous, right? I mean, that guide program is maybe a model that then can be more broadly used.
Yeah, I guarantee they would have saved so much money getting my father identified way earlier, but I'm sorry, the hospital wants to just ring that credit card. I mean, the amount of MRIs, the amount of tests they do once they know you're in the 70s, like my doctor will never even do an MRI. I mean, you know, and that's the sad, you know, we need to have more precision medicine, you know, better decision making. So
well, it's also people are afraid of talking about some of these topics. So many of the issues, when you look at the broader healthcare, so it's financial health, it's planning, you know, people don't like to talk about these topics. And you know, I was having lunch with the CEO of a large hospice company who gave me a shocking stat, because like you, my mother was hospice at the end of her life. And I thought it was, you know, it was phenomenal. It was the right thing for her. And what he told me is their average person is in hospice for 12 days. And the reason they're in hospice for 12 days is because people don't want to talk to them about an option, because that means that you're really saying, okay, I'm going to die, as opposed to having the conversation 6 months out of saying, here are the options, here are those ways it could develop, and what's your preference? How would you like to handle this? Lots of people aren't going to want hospice.
Yeah.
But for most people, it's a very nice way, you know, to end your life.
I can only say, and I fully agree with you, Stephen. And you know, my dad, thankfully, is still with us, still honoring him. But the thing is that it's the dignity part that it's such, like, very few people realize, but of all healthcare, I think it has the highest family patient satisfaction service out of everything. And the reason is, for the first time, you get coordinated care. You get a chaplain that comes out. My mom is still like, I don't know why he's coming out. What's like, he's probably doing way more than you think, just listening to you. The fact, you know, and you got someone that comes, helps bathe and wash. You got all their medications taken care of. And then you got the oxygen, the on-call nurse. So the last time I had to sleep over, my mom was frightened. His pulsats had gone down, and he refused. The paramedics came, the fire department, hell no, I'm not going. So then in the morning, he finally went. I had to take him, and that after that 3 or 4 days, we were able to get him onto hospice. But now he has his oxygen. Now we have the 24/7 nurse, and I'm sorry, but this is a part of it. But the real problem with the decision making, the Achilles heel, was the guilt. the guilt that my mother had. And so she was not comfortable as a primary caregiver to do that in the fear of what her children would say. I mean, that's really probably the one thing. And finally, she was able to have a authoritative decision maker, not the primary care doc of my dad, never referred, but a educated nurse practitioner at the hospital that's a nurse practitioner in palliative care that was able to do it in the way that was supposed to be done. That should have happened almost a year ago.
Yeah, and that's why I say one of the most important things, there's things from a business perspective I'd like to see change, but from a market perspective, the most important thing is messaging to people that they should be talking about these issues, right? The fact that you feel guilt over doing what is right for somebody, it should be a collective family discussion, depending upon your family dynamic, of what does this individual want and how does that impact the family and what's the best way to do that. It's the same way people say, don't ever put somebody in a skilled nursing facility or don't put them in X, Y, or Z. For lots of people, they have constraints and there are reasons why it might be the best environment.
Mm-hmm.
We, in all three cases of my family, we chose, for the individual to stay and die at home. But lots of people don't have that's a luxury.
Yeah.
To be able to afford the help and the flexibility in terms of timing.
Yeah, I think what you brought up is making me think of where I say aging in place. And I thought of it when I had Jake with his upside.
Like Jake, I love what he's doing.
This whole concept of aging in place is nonsense. It's not the place. Aging, like, irregardless of where you are. It's not the place. Aging in the state of mind. I mean, really, it's like, the house that my parents had, there's no way. I mean, that's just like, and I think now where I am and you are, we're now already in our mind thinking, okay, downsizing's normal. Maybe I want to be in a condo somewhere else. So it's like you're naturally creating those better environments.
We have that discussion all the time. The house I live in is not the house that I want to die in. Mm-hmm. It's a beautiful house to raise a family and all sorts of activity. Get me back to a nice apartment where everybody's doing everything for me, and all I have to worry about is what happens in my little unit.
So you're solving a huge problem with HealthHive.
Trying.
And what are you doing on the marketing? Are you going to any conferences? What is your big kind of?
Yes, but again, we're doing something that most people would not do, which is I'm not marketing because I'm still learning. So I'm going to conferences, but I'm going to the conferences that matter to me from a user perspective and talking to people. So, I love health. I love Vive. I'm not going because for the problems that I'm trying to solve at this stage, that's not the right audience. I'm going to smaller conferences that are more niche focused, whether you talk about greenhouse, which, I had, a year ago, I'd never heard of greenhouse.
Bill Thomas, right? Didn't he start that concept?
Yeah. Obviously going to the American Society on Aging conference, to the Point Click Care conference, to places where it's not about building our brand. It's about learning about user needs, whoever those users are. And, my expectation is if I have this conversation with you next year, I'll be saying, no, now we're at a point where we're out there building brand. But right now, what I want to do is find the right partners, the right people to work with. And, my number one priority is now to get geographic concentration in an area where we have a customer that has either owns the assets or has enough influence over the assets to say, let's start to pull all these pieces together. So as HealthHive, I have customers doing different things, Now I want the geographic concentration where we can pull it all together and say what's working, what's not working, and how do we fix that. So, I'm looking Colorado and California. There are 5 states that I'm focused on looking for, the right party.
And those are states so California and Colorado, and I imagine California in itself, because they really have some of the infrastructure, the conversations around these, what would call, I hate to use the buzzword, it's kind of getting a little stale now. They're using new ones, but the social determinants of health, health equity, maybe. But for you, and I guess maybe some really robust caregiver programs, like for instance, there's a lot of cool stuff in California with caregiver programs for families being able to, if the parents qualify. Well, I think they do that nationwide, but tell me a little bit about your thoughts.
I think in like 20, I think it now is like in 27 states.
Okay.
That's another problem is, there is such a difference depending upon the state and the agency that you talk to, that people don't know what's available to them. There are lots of things out there now, but there's not the awareness of what's there. Another reason I like California is if you look at, or do you know are you familiar with the community care hubs?
Not, I've heard a little bit about that.
Still not known by most people. And community care hubs is basically just another structure to deliver community-based organization services. So instead of having a bunch of CBOs doing their own thing, going to your point of they don't have a lot of money, they don't have the right infrastructure, the community care hub becomes an entity that is either set up as a new co to operate this, or else it's an existing large CBO that then starts to tie in other CBOs. So it becomes a central point of contact for a range of social services. And they have a technology infrastructure where they're sharing data. So they're even further behind traditional healthcare in terms of their data and data integrations, but they're moving in the right direction. And California happens to have a few very good CCHs. So that's an interesting way for us to be looking at how do we tie in some of these social resources to the problems we're solving.
Well, man, I'm glad you came on today. I've learned so much.
It's fun. I love talking about this, and always happy to speak with anybody who is interested in this space. I truly don't view anybody out there as a competitor. We may do the same thing, but we're all trying it in different ways and trying to figure out what works and what doesn't.
Mm-hmm. No, I like your approach. I know I would imagine not everyone sees that. I try to operate my mindset in that way too. I think, but I also don't have the level of IP your company. I mean, but there is. I think we can get so much further together. I mean, that's one of the things where I have this Bring a Friend show series coming, which that would be great. I would love to have you on if there's someone you are really that's with the American Society on Aging, or some great colleague that you're trying to really noodle through a project or a pilot that you want to share more about to have on the future. I've sort of started this new series. It's called Bring a Friend. And it's basically reimagine healthcare together. I mean, the concept is let's do it together. Let's have these conversations. And if we could make a panel about it, more than 2 or 3. And because what I'm just amazed by when you have, in real time, smart people like yourself, like something actually it just transpires and organically happens, just like you were telling me with these community care hubs and just the different conferences that you're attending. So anyway.
One of the most successful things that I used to do, at my last company when I would speak at conferences is, as opposed to being a speaker, I would have, 3 people walk into a bar, and it was a casual conversation generally of, a tech executive in terms of what am I trying to do, a clinical executive talking about why it is that the things work or don't work in the way they think about it, and then a third party of, again, depending upon what it was, a patient and what is their experience with it, or, a practitioner at the level where they're actually delivering the service and why these things don't work. And those turn into really interesting conversations. So I love what you're doing with the bring a friend. I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, thank you so much. Is there anything you want to shout out or highlight or how you can be reached? I know you've shared really well about certain key interested partners. You've named some of them. Anything else? This is your time, Stephen.
No, I mean, there's so many people out there doing things that there are lots of them, people that I know, but there are lots of people that I don't know. And those are the people that I'm really interested in talking to. I'm on LinkedIn, happy to connect. And as I say, happy to, I'm not looking for money yet, but I certainly will be. And I'm looking for people that are focused on the mission of, how do you create a community, particularly around, the underserved. Others have the same problems, but it's much easier for me to get answers than it is for lots of other people. And those are the people we're really trying to help.
Well, man, this has been awesome to
Have
have you on.
Thank you.
Well, we're going to be wrapping it up. We are wrapping it up today on Planetary Health First, Mars Next. We had an amazing conversation with Stephen Farber, who is the CEO, co-founder, founder of HealthHive, and they are really doing some great stuff, building a really cool collective, and it's really solving a big, sticky, messy problem that like everyone's dealing with. I mean, if you're breathing and you're live in America, I don't care if you're 5 to 7, everyone's impacted by caregiving, or whether you're 91 or 100 or centennial. So anyway,